Hey there, Heather, ho there, it's Jeff Cutter Diamond. Welcome you to yet another Cutter Top 10 video. And of course, with the World Cup finally finishing the group stages, we're going to be looking at the top 10 moments from the World Cup group stages. Not from match day 1, 2, or 3, it's just the top 10 moments. Now, I actually did it easily. Well, there was 12 groups, and I did one moment per group. There were some that wouldn't make the cut. There were three groups that there were a few groups that didn't have like a magic moment, so I just basically added a few in. So hopefully you enjoy this, and of course the round of 32 is going on right here right now, so we got to take that in mind. Anyway, here we go. Number 10 is the prestigious job by DR Congo in Group K. Group K was always going to be the Portugal and Colombia show, with DR Congo and Uzbekistan fighting for third place and maybe, just maybe, getting into the World Cup playoffs. Of course, that was what happened. DR Congo did beat Uzbekistan on the final group day, but what's even more impressive was they tied Portugal on day one. Congo did finish third with a win, a loss, and a tie. Pretty much okay. Now, of course, DR Congo was coming off this was their second World Cup appearance. Their first in 1974 was as Zaire, and of course, that was when Mobutu became the dictator, and Congo played terribly against Brazil, Yugoslavia, and Scotland in that group. But DR Congo is in the round of 32 against England, and it looks pretty impressive. Number 9 is the Darwin game in Group G, Egypt versus New Zealand. So anyhow, Group G had a key match. They had Egypt, they had New Zealand, they had Belgium, and Iran. So that happened. On match day 2, Egypt took on New Zealand in Vancouver. But it was a massively significant game. Going into the game, Egypt and New Zealand were combined 0, 8, and 7 at the World Cup in their histories. Egypt had played 8 games, New Zealand had played 7. You may be asking how that was possible. Well, in 1934, when Egypt qualified, it was what they called a knockout phase. All 16 teams played 8 matches, and it was a knockout phase. No group stages. Now they did 38. Egypt would actually win the game. Yeah, well, Egypt in 1990 qualified, and so did 2018, going winless in those games. And you get 3 group stage matches. So that was 7, and they lost the first game. New Zealand in 1982 won nothing. They did prevent Scotland from qualifying due to goal differential. And then in 2010, they actually ended up having 3 ties, including against Italy. They ended up tying their first group stage game. And then, of course, Egypt beat New Zealand 3-1, Mo Salah scoring a goal. And New Zealand did not win the final group stage game, which means that they're 9 games without a win. They have had ties with 4 points. Their 9-match losing streak, if you will, 0 for 9, ties them with Honduras for the worst in FIFA World Cup history. Look it up, people. Number 8 is Curacao scoring on Germany first day of Group E. Everyone knows that Curacao. Well, Curacao's more known in my mind for being Little League World Baseball, Little League World Series baseball icons in the mid 2000s. But yeah, Curacao with Andrew Jones, who's now in the Hall of Fame. But yeah, they ended up qualifying through the North American group and would take on Germany in their first group stage game. Germany was up 1-0 when Curacao scored to tie the game. It was shocking. Could Curacao get a point against Germany? Unfortunately, though, that was a big no-no, as Germany scored 6 straight goals to win 7-1. But that was amazing for Curacao. I know I could have also put Ecuador's win over Germany because that was big. But anyway, everyone knew Germany qualified. Yeah, Curacao, they did get a tie against Ecuador, which was big. And no, this was not the biggest win for Germany by goals or by differential. Those 2 things happened against Saudi Arabia in 2002 as they won 8-0 in the group stage. Number 7 is South Africa's triumph over Korea and subsequent elimination of Korea. So Group A was set in stone. It was going to be Mexico and South Korea. Everyone knew that. Mexico hosting on home turf couldn't beat Azteca. How many teams beat Mexico and Azteca? Barely, barely few. Anyway, the second match day, Mexico did create 1-0, but unfortunately, the Korean goalie actually had the ball in his hands, but he bounced down to the turf and then it basically slipped. And Mexico won the game. However, their third match against South Africa was huge, as South Africa would shock Korea 2-1 and not only beat South Korea, but actually end up taking second place in the group, which was automatic passage to the round of 32. And of course, as of this taping, South Africa lost to Canada, so that means Canada's in the round of 16. Anyway, it was shocking because Canada, after their loss to Switzerland earlier in the day, Canada was anticipating Korea in the round of 32. All Korea needed was a point, but Korea let it slip. And worst of all, Korea, with a lot of results from the third place teams, actually didn't qualify for the World Cup round of 32. So they are one of the shocks that went home, unless at Uruguay. Number 6 is the fact from Group C. It's the scene's so typically Scottish. So in Group C, Brazil was with Morocco, Scotland, and Haiti. Haiti, this was their second trip to the World Cup. In 1974, they were blasted, but they had scored twice, including once against Dino Soff of Italy, breaking his 1,100 plus minute streak of not giving up a goal in international play. Scotland knew they were up against it. They took down Haiti like they should have, but only 1-0. For the first time since 1990, Scotland had won a group stage game, or a game at the World Cup, if you will. And then they ended up losing to Morocco 1-0 and Brazil 3-0. They just couldn't score. They only had one goal in 3 games and all that. Curacao, by process, had 2 goals. The lack of goal scoring ruined Scotland, as they did take third place, but their 1-2 mark was definitely not good enough. And Scotland again missed the World Cup knockout stages. This was their 9th time to the World Cup, and they never made it through the knockout stages. You may be asking, what? How do you figure? Well, 1954, their first trip, they actually mishandled the Swiss weather when it was in triple digits. That, of course, in Fahrenheit, of course. And then they fell. Well, 58, they just couldn't beat France to save their lives. 74, no, yeah, 74, they qualified for the World Cup in the group with Brazil, Zaire, and Yugoslavia. But Scotland couldn't beat Zaire by enough. They beat them by 2, but Brazil beat Zaire by 3, and that goal differential thing actually ruined the Scots. 1978, they also had a group problem. They lost to Peru. They tied Iran. Why would you tie Iran? And then they ended up beating the Dutch, but the Dutch had their B team out there. The Scots needed to win by 3 goals to sneak in ahead of Peru for the trip to the knockout stages, but they failed. 1982, they ended up giving up 2 goals to New Zealand, and that actually cost them in losing the tiebreak to the Soviets on goal differential. In 1986, they were hacked off the pitch by Uruguay, making sure that Uruguay took third place. In 1990, they actually lost to Costa Rica, beat Sweden, and then needed a tie against Brazil to go through. But Jim Layden made a terrible call, and Scotland scored, and Scotland got scored on. And then in 1998, Scotland went 3-out. But yeah, so Scotland's 9th World Cup trip did not go to a knockout stage, and their 4 trips to the Euro has not done it. So they've been to 13 major tournaments, but 0 knockout games. I mean, frig, like, you got a couple of teams I will mention on this list actually making the round of 32, making a knockout game. Number 5 is Iran's game against, I can't remember who it is, Egypt. Yeah, Iran and Egypt were playing each other. Final group stage game in Group G. Of course, Group I didn't have any definitive moment, so I just pushed another Group G moment. Well, of course, the Darwin match between Egypt and New Zealand, and then Iran getting screwed. So Iran played Egypt. Unfortunately, FIFA wanted to make it the pride match and celebrate the LGBTQ community. One tiny problem though, even though Seattle was a good city for that to happen, Egypt and Iran, it was basically a death sentence if you were homosexual. So basically, that was terrible in the first place. Nevertheless, Egypt and Iran tied 1-1. Iran had the 2-1 goal in stoppage time, which would have got them into the tournament at Egypt's expense, as it seemed. However, one tiny little problem. VAR said that the guy was offside by a fucking toenail. So this is my foot, and this is how much by my finger, and this is how much the freaking offside was. Like, so controversial. It was like by a toe length and all that. Well, Iran what took third place, and they were still kind of in the tournament, but results would screw them over. And we'll talk about that shortly. Number 4 in Group H was Cabo Verde's debut and putting up 3 freaking ties. This was shocking because Cabo Verde, or Cape Verde as I call it, got in. And Africa got 10 teams to the knockout stage. 10 teams to the World Cup. Now, this is a tasty stat. 9 African teams made the round of 32 out of 10. The only misfire was Tunisia, of all teams, not Cabo Verde, not Senegal, and not even Ghana. Were the screwballs. It was Tunisia. But nevertheless, Cabo Verde shocked everyone. Group Day won against Spain, forcing the defending Euro champs at a 0-0 tie. Spain, of course, the massive pre-tournament favorites. EA Sports even said so. And then Cabo Verde tied Uruguay 2-2. They were actually up 2-1 in Uruguay. And Saudi Arabia was a 0-0 tie, which was shocking. I thought for sure that Cabo Verde or Saudi Arabia would have won that game. So what's even more crazy is they put up 3 ties. They took second place ahead of Uruguay and Saudi Arabia. And of course, because Uruguay only had 2 points, and so did Saudi Arabia, those teams were out, and Uruguay shockingly went out. And of course, Cape Verde, the same thing with Iran. Iran had 3 ties, Cabo Verde had 3 ties, but Cape Verde had the benefit of Spain winning the only 2 games. The only 2 games that were not tied in Group H were Spain's victories over Uruguay and the Saudis. Number 3 is Canada's first World Cup win against Qatar. Of course, it's nationalistic, I know, but fuck that. Come on, it's Canada. Americans would probably make this list, make it lower. But nevertheless, Canada got to the World Cup for the 3rd time. 1986, they won the CONCACAF thing by beating Honduras in St. John's, Newfoundland, screwing over Honduran fans who actually went to St. John, apparently apostrophe, New Brunswick. Canada would take on France, the Soviets, and Hungary in their group. No goals scored, but they only conceded 5, which wasn't half bad when you consider one of those goals. They only gave up 1 to France, the defending Euro champs. 2022, Canada went through a tough CONCACAF qualifying group and won the group, getting to the World Cup in Qatar. Canada was paired up with Belgium, Croatia, and Morocco. So anyway, Canada would lose to Belgium 1-0, lost to Croatia 4-1, even though they scored their first World Cup goal in history, Alphonso Davies' name, and then lost to Morocco 2-1. Canada does play Morocco in the round of 16, if you must know. So anyhow, Canada would be in the group with Switzerland, Qatar, and Bosnia-Herzegovina. They tied Bosnia 1-1, and then had the game in Qatar against Vancouver on a Thursday night. Canada easily crushed Qatar 6-0. A lot of people said Canada should have put their foot off the pedal, but goal differential does matter. Anyway, Canada beat Qatar, finally giving Canada a World Cup victory. They did lose to Switzerland, as I projected and predicted. Canada ended up second in Group B. That's fine. They made it through anyhow, top 2 teams. But the goal differential was big because Bosnia-Herzegovina also won, lost, and tied. And of course, Canada crushing Bosnia on goal differential and crushing Qatar. That worked. That made them in. Bosnia did qualify for the round of 32 anyway. Number 2 is Austria-Algeria, Group J. Well, sorry. Yeah, Group J, Austria-Algeria, the last game. So the final game of the match of the group stages, of all the group stagings, was Austria-Algeria. It finished later than Argentina's game against Jordan, which Argentina won 2-1. Nevertheless, Austria and Algeria were fighting tooth and nail. They both had 2 points. There were rumors circulating that Austria and Algeria were going to purposely tie, with Iran being the last team who needed help. If any of those two teams won, then Iran would have gone in. I think Americans were getting a little nervous and all that. But nevertheless, it was a back and forth game. Algeria actually tied the game when, strange as it sounds, when a clearing shot from Algeria actually landed and hit the corner flag, and then it bounced off the corner flag right to the Algerian player, and then he passed it off and they scored. If that flag was not there, that would have been a goal kick for Austria. Anyway, the game was tight to the last seconds. Algeria had the lead in extra time, stoppage time, and then Austria, with the last kick of the game, scored the goal. They tied Algeria. They both played to win, and that happened. So Austria ended up second place on goal differential, which got them automatically in. Algeria took third place and knocked Iran out. Iran was pissed. They had tied 3 times and didn't qualify. Well, you needed to win. And you see Cape Verde with 3 ties, but of course Group H was terrible. Take heart, Iran, because a lot of people said that maybe if Iran had qualified, they would get 3 ties. They would be like the 2016 Portugal squad in Euro, because that's what happened to them, and they won the title. And lastly, number one is the goal scoring exploits, not just of Leo Messi, but of Kylian Mbappe and, to a lesser effect, Erling Haaland. So the World Cup has basically been down to 3 guys scoring goals almost on the same day, as it seemed. Well, we all know about Haaland and getting Norway into the tournament, and his Viking heritage, and Norway taking on Ivory Coast in the round of 32. But also, you got to look at Kylian Mbappe, who's carrying France on his shoulders. He put up goal after goal after goal, and finally broke the World Cup record, the French World Cup record of most goals by a player ever. It was 13 since 1958, when Jules Fontaine went bananas in that 1958 tournament. Otherwise, yeah, no Frenchman had touched that. With a 10-foot puller and 8-foot Croat. Whoa. Anyway, but let's not forget, it's Leo freaking Messi. Messi proved everything. He's got 6 goals in 3 games in the World Cup. Argentina has to wait a couple of days for Cabo Verde. It's the real David versus Goliath matchup we all want to see. But the fact of the matter is that Leo Messi now is the all-time goal-scoring leader at World Cups, beating Miro Klose. His longevity is huge. He was a bench player in 2006. In 2010, he kind of started everything. 10, 14, 18, 22 with the title in 26. So congratulations to Leo Messi and all that. And the old guys performing at a high level. So anyway, that's all I've got. I'm Jeff Diamond. Do.